Welcome to today's episode in the Nordic's Military Forces series. Today we'll be looking at the Nordic navies. Be sure to stick around until the end for the power comparison and analysis. Let's go. We start off by looking at the surface combat ships of all four nations. Both Norway and Denmark have a decent amount of frigates, and Norway have ordered another 5 with their recent increase in defense spending. One of Denmark's anti-air frigates recently showed that Denmark's frigate program could use some further upgrading as it had a failure in its air defense platform during a mission in the Red Sea. The Danish Chief of Defense has been relieved of his position due to the situation. When looking at the Corvettes of the Nordics, this is really where the combined force packs a punch. The skilled Corvette was long hailed as the fastest military ship in the world, and practically all of these ships carry extensive missile systems. Sweden and Finland have ordered 4 new high-tech Corvettes each. Total operational 21. Only Sweden and Norway have submarines out of the 4, and both nations have ordered additional subs. Sweden is known for its very stealthy submarines, and the newly ordered subs will likely be one of the most high-tech submarines in the world. It's also worth pointing out that Sweden's submarines have very different technical assets to that of Norway. Norway have the very deep Atlantic Ocean all along its coast, while Sweden has to have submarines that can operate in the very shallow Baltic. Moving on to mine warfare ships, we see that all 4 nations have some capability here. In this instance, it is worth pointing out that Finland has one of the most advanced sea mine programs in the world, and mainly utilizes air assets to deploy mines. Total operational 19. The workhorses of the Nordic navies are without a doubt their patrol ships. With such an extensive coastline to cover, these patrol ships are often larger than the typical patrol ship, and Norway in particular has very tough requirements for the ships, seeing as they often have to face some of the toughest weather on the planet. Total operational 100 plus. Whereas Finland and Denmark have opted to enhance their signals capability within their air forces, Sweden and Norway have some fairly high-tech signals and intelligence ships. When you couple these assets with Norway's P-8 Poseidon and Sweden's Saab intelligence aircraft, they provide a very effective force. The Baltic Sea has lots of shallow archipelagos and rock formations, which means that Sweden and Finland needs a very flexible and mobile navy. They have opted for large, fast boat forces that can react quickly. Sweden produces their own CB-90, which by all accounts is one of the best military boats of its class. Finland also produces very capable attack boats. Denmark and Norway mainly use their variants for special forces and as additions to their frigates. All 4 nations have environmental protection ships, which often helps reduce oil spills or potential issues surrounding chemical biological warfare. In Norway, they work alongside Norway's petroleum industry and also act as a deterrent for interference with Norwegian offshore industry. Furthermore, all 4 navies have a lot of different auxiliary ships. These lists are not exhaustive, and generally, all 4 nations have a ship for each role. Norway needs more of an ice-breaking capability than the rest, and also has a much larger need for naval replenishment due to the distances up to its territories in the Barents Sea. Total operational 50 plus. As we've seen in many conflicts recently, anti-ship missiles can render almost any navy useless. The Nordic navies all have anti-ship batteries, either stationary like Finland or on moving trucks like the 3 others. Kongsberg in Norway produces the Naval Strike Missile and the Penguin, while Sweden produces the RBS anti-ship launched missiles and launchers. It's worth noting that Finland has focused heavily on stationary coastal artillery, which essentially covers most of their coast from within thick bunkers. Total operational 380 plus. Now let's move on to personnel. The total active personnel of the Nordic navies is just over 17,000. While at full mobilization, these 4 nations could muster a total of around 100,000 personnel. Finland and Norway have a much larger reserve pool than the 2 others. A factor that could be interesting when it comes to comparing how the Nordic navies rank is total displacement. This is a gauge used by navies across the world to essentially measure the size and amount of ships you've got in your navy mathematically. This doesn't necessarily mean so much anymore, as fast corvettes can do as much damage as a frigate with a well-placed missile, but it is still a good measuring stick when it comes to total assets. As we can see, Norway and Denmark have a bigger fleet than the two others, but due to the shallow waters of the Baltic, that doesn't necessarily mean so much. Swedish and Finnish ships can't be as heavy as the Norwegian and Danish ones, or else they'd struggle in the Baltic Sea. Now let's compare the combined total displacement of the four Nordic navies with some of the larger navies in Europe. As we can see, both the UK and France outpace the Nordic totals by a lot, while mostly landlocked Germany is much closer in size. As a gauging stick, and looking at how the Nordic Air Force punches well above this when it comes to modern airframes and total soldiers, it seems to me that the Nordics need to invest more in their navies. Let's move on to the analysis. When you look at the positives for the Nordic Navy, there are some bright spots. First of all, there are some very modern and capable ships. Especially the corvettes in Sweden and Norway are deadly and fast. They're made to counter big lumbering ships and get away, which is likely the scenario any of these nations would potentially face. The anti-ship capability in all four nations is great. Sweden and Norway produce 3 of the best anti-ship batteries and missiles in the world and give excellent cover from land. Finland is also well protected by a massive amount of fixed coastal artillery. The technological edge that especially Sweden and Norway possesses within missile production makes their navies much more effective than what they look like on paper. All four nations have also pledged increased navies, with Norway getting more submarines and possibly also more frigates, Finland investing in corvettes, and Sweden getting more corvettes and 1 new submarine. It's going in the right direction. As always, it is important to discuss the downsides. That way, there is a will to improve. Firstly, as Denmark's anti-air frigate showed us in the Red Sea, all modern navies are very susceptible to drones. There needs to be heavy investment in anti-drone capability in all four navies. Secondly, there aren't enough assets to cover the whole coastline. All four nations have extensive coastlines, with Norway having one of the longest in the world. There needs to be further investment in reconnaissance aircraft or ships in order to have adequate cover. Recently, we've also seen that both the Norwegian and Danish Navy have had their share of blunders. Hopefully, the reshuffles that happened after the Helge Ingstad and Eva Fitfeldt incidents leads to things being taken more seriously than what they have been. And lastly, my favorite word, interoperability. These four navies need to work together on how to help each other's assets work in the best possible manner. Signing a declaration of cooperation like with their air forces would be a great first step. So friends, that was it. The armed forces branches of all the Nordic nations. Before you go, I'd love to ask you if you've got any ideas on which countries you'd like me to cover next, or if you have any feedback in general. I make these videos for you guys, so the content needs to match what it is you'd like to see. Some people want me to do a special forces review of the Nordic nations, and that is on my list. Please let me know in the comments below what it is you'd like me to cover, and I'll do my utmost to do it. If you haven't seen them already, you can find the links to my review of the Nordic land forces and air forces in the comments and description. And I've got other cool videos too. Check them out and let me know what you think. Stay safe, folks.